Hi, and welcome back to another episode on How to Hack. So today we're going to discuss a lot about defense using Snort and how we can create rules that is going to be particular to your network environment and how you can monitor for potential services using Snort, which is a intrusion detection system. And then thinking about the kind of messaging that you want to create, the actions once you have discovered and monitored for potential activities in the environment, whether it's port scanning, accesses to different services, looking into a browsing of a web server, and so on. So a lot of those capabilities can be detected very quickly using Snort. And then from there on, you can decide on the action path. So without further ado, let's get started on today's tutorial on defense. So on the screen here, I actually have Kali Linux running, and I've also installed Snort into Kali Linux. So if I zoom in into a terminal, and I can see clearly when I enter man Snort. So this will bring up the manual page. So Snort is an open source network intrusion detection system, and it's a wonderful, wonderful tool. So my take for you, my call for you is to actually go up and read up the entire manual page so that you understand what you can do to actually create alerts, create different kind of defense mechanisms as you find out about the different kind of triggers that will happen in the network. So this is really important. And similarly, it also works for firewalls, whether they're on a network or whether they're host-based. So it's really, really important about how you want to manage all these intrusion detection and intrusion prevention systems. So this is really important. So let us go ahead and take a look at some rules that we're going to learn how to create them, how do we manage them, and looking at them, what are considered good rules to be put into the network. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cd into etc/snort/rules. So once you're in the folder, in the directory, enter ls-l so you can see all the rules that are available within the folder. So here we can see their attack response, backdoor, bad traffic, community for FTP, and so on. So these are really, really important rules to look at. So the number one rule we're going to look at today is about how we can craft really simple ones. And then I'm going to teach you how you can actually build a really advanced ones that is customized for your enterprise environment so that you can detect particular kind of different attacks in the environment. So the first thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at ICMP. So ICMP, Internet Control Message Protocol, pretty straightforward. So we're going to do a sudo gedit into icmp.rules. So over here, we're going to look at the rules, and I have already taken the liberty to actually comment out quite a number of the alerts that's going to be generated, because the first thing we want to do is to actually look at potential attacks in the environment. So the first thing I'm going to look at is a very simple way about the alerts. So before I even go in further, I want to share a little more through a presentation deck about what we think on about the Snort rules. So the first thing we're going to look at is here, the format, the syntax of the Snort rule. So at the very right, on the very left, you have alert. So it's an action. So you have alert, log, pass, drop, reject, and SD drop. And then of course, moving on to the right, you have your TCP protocols. So it could be a TCP, it could be UDP, it could be ICMP. And for today's tutorial, we will share a little more about ICMP and for you to learn a little about others through TCP, UDP, and the likes. So again, it depends a lot on the environment. And then you have your source address, which is where is the source of the IP coming from. You have your source port. So in this case, we're putting 21. And of course, your direction, is it going to be one way or is it going to be bi-directional? So these are important points to think about when you're crafting out the rules. And here is your destination address and your destination port. And then on the most right side, you have the rule option. So what happens when you detected those activities and those triggers? Do you want to do a message? Do you want to logging? Do you want to look into the sequence, the ICMP ID, and so on? So these are really, really important things to really think about. So with that, we'll go back into the tutorial in Kali Linux. So over here, we have the Kali Linux machine running. And the first one we'll look at is a alert. So the alert have an ICMP, meaning we're going to send a ping packet, Internet Control Message Protocol packet, from any IP address from any ports into 192.168.1.23 and into any ports again. And we will flag it out as ICMP packet file. And then we have an SID of the like. So again, you can set the SID to what you think is feasible, to what you think is practical for your environment. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into terminal, and I'm going to open a new window, and I'm going to zoom into the window. So what we can see here is there's also other capabilities that we want to really think about. And those capabilities are actually going to be in the Snort configuration file. So that's really, really important too. So we have to find out what is inside the Snort configuration file. So the first thing we want to look at is we can also sudo gedit /etc/snort/snort.configuration. So once you do that, we can actually launch into the Snort configuration file. It's a pretty lengthy look, and it's really important because if you look at the IP variable, they will ask you about DNS servers, they ask you about home network, and so on. So these are really critical points as you build the reference sets, the reference model of how you actually want to monitor. So if you can identify the IP addresses in your network, identify the IP addresses of your SMTP servers, identify the address of your HTTP servers, your SQL servers, your telnet servers, your secure shell, and all of those information, it will make Snort that much smarter. So here, for example, if your HTTP ports are only on port 80, on 81, 383, for example, you can remove the rest of it so that it makes Snort a lot smarter in terms of detection, a lot more granular, and the alerts are gonna be a lot more finer. So these are really critical points because you do not want thousands of alerts every second. You want to be specific. So now that we have all these rules being set forward and the reference sets being set forward, the next thing you can do is actually to launch Snort into the intrusion detection monitoring stage. So the first thing you can actually do is to start Snort. So you can enter sudo snort followed by -a followed by console followed by -q -u snort for user, and then followed by -c, which is the configuration file that we're going to specify that we saw earlier. And of course from there we're going to look at the Ethernet number. So the Ethernet number is actually ETH0. So if I actually open up one more new window and we zoom in a little just to find out the IP address as well as the network interface, we can see that we are on ETH0 as well as an IP address of 192.168.1.23. So this is the call Linux server that is going to run a Apache web server. So here going back, we can enter ETH0 and then you can go ahead and hit enter. So once you hit enter, we are going to start monitoring. So over here, we're going to go back here and we see there's an error message. So we're going to look at why is this generating the error. So the first thing we can look at is fail to open log file ETH0, no such file directory. So what we can do is we can actually look forward to how we can structure the file. So here we see etc snort/snort.config. So again, we can actually look for the file, and then again we can do -l followed by ETH0. Oops, it's -i followed by ETH0. So once we do that, we are launching into a monitoring mode. So we are monitoring all activities. So the next thing I can do is I can go into another terminal, and what I can do is I can enter sudo service apache 2 followed by status. So we see that the server has been stopped, so we can go ahead and start the service, and then when we hit start, that will actually help us start the Apache web server. And if I go into a browser, I can enter 192.168.1.23 followed by port 8001. And when I hit enter, I can actually see that I'm gone into the web server. And of course, if I go to the Snort rules, you can see that we are not logging anything down. So the important point here is to recognize that the Snort rule is not picking things up. And we recognize that very quickly because we have disabled that. So the next thing I can do is to look at a command, and I can ping 192.168.1.23. And once I hit enter, again, likewise, we can see that we are triggering the Snort, and then we are looking at the ICMP packet file. So with that, we can actually stop the Snort from monitoring, and then we can go back and look into the configuration file, and then we can edit the configuration file again. So that is really important. So now we're here, we can enter ls-l, sudo gedit, followed by Snort, followed by ICMP, followed by .rules. And once you have that, I can actually go into the second alert. So when you saw the web browser that I did and I accessed earlier, you realize that there was no alerts coming in. So now I remove the comment. We can see that we have alert for TCP, because when you serve browsing, when you're browsing on the web, you're actually using transmission control protocol from any source. any port going into the target IP address from port 8001, and we want the message to be as such HTTP packet file, SID, and the like. So all these are important configurations that you want to set for it. Once you have saved it, close it, and then we can launch the Snort again. And this time around, because we have updated the rules, and once I hit enter, we are now monitoring. And if I actually do a refresh onto the web server, or I hit an enter, and immediately we can actually see all the HTTP packet that is being discovered by the system. So this is really a quick way for you to understand how you can configure rules by yourself, looking at the reference sets, looking at all the web servers that you have. So going back to the presentation, some things for you to really think about as a challenge to really think through about not just Snort, but about firewall, network intrusion detection system, prevention systems. It's about, what about anomaly detection? Because everything is rule-based. Everything is based on rules. What do you do if there are different ways where they try to bypass some of those rules? And if you think about it, the default Snort rules that you have seen earlier are actually known. If you look at the list of the etc Snort folder, you can see that there's a lot of those rules that are known to the hackers, known to the attackers. And what about misconfiguration as well? And finally, if you turn on so many rules and you have millions and millions of access into the server, it's gonna be CPU intensive, and where do you store the log file? So these are really important points and challenges for you to actually think about, and for you to actually leave a comment if you wanna ask, and then really think about your responses to those questions. So now that you've seen how we play defense, there's some really important things to think about. First of all, playing defense is actually a lot harder than playing offense, because all you need is one misconfiguration, one dominant account, one vulnerability, and the next thing you know, you're compromised. So playing defense is a lot harder than playing offense. Offense, you could send phishing emails, you can send payloads directly into the web servers, into the mobile devices, and so on, that you have watched and learned from other tutorials. So playing defense is a very different mindset as well. And you really want to think about holistically. If you have thousands of servers, you're not going to go in and configure each of those Snort or intrusion detection systems or firewall and so on. So it's really about having a centralized console that can actually manage all of those security events, security activities that's happening in the environment. And in terms of the Snort rules, something for you to think about is also how do you precisely set forward the IP address in your systems so that the services there open up. When a hacker tries to get into the environment, you can actually immediately flag those activities out. So one great example I can tell you right now is endpoints should not be connecting to other endpoints, because technically endpoints do not have services, unless of course you're in a peer-to-peer network. But in large enterprises, endpoints do not talk to endpoints. And this is again another great Snort rule that you can put into your network, into your switches, into your routers, and so on. So thank you so much for watching again. So I hope you have learned something valuable today. If you have any questions, leave a comment below, like, share, and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching again.